Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is the Google Pixel 2, which is a 5-inch smartphone with a full HD display, and it's one of two Pixel phones that Google's releasing in 2017. The other is a 6-inch phone called the Pixel 2 XL. While the smaller model is priced at $650 and up, the larger version sells for $850 and up. And if you're wondering why I'm not holding the two of them side by side right now, it's because I'm actually shooting this video on the Pixel 2 XL, so you can get a little bit of a sense of the camera quality. And the camera, I think, is really one of the main selling points of both phones. Generally speaking, they have very similar specifications, including that 12.2 megapixel rear camera and the pixel imprint fingerprint sensor here on the back. They both have Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 processors, 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage. The main differences have to do with the display and the battery, and I'll have a full review of the Pixel 2 XL coming up soon. But for right now, I wanted to take a look primarily at the smaller phone, which I find to be really nice and easy to hold in one hand. It's a nice size. The design is something that I think a lot of people are not going to love because it does sort of look a little bit dated in terms of the bezels. We've got fairly sizable bezels here on the top and the bottom, which is pretty standard fare for a phone from a couple of years ago. But these days, people have come to really expect thinner bezels. And you get those with the Pixel 2 XL, but not with the Pixel 2. Personally, it doesn't bother me, especially because we've got stereo front-facing speakers here in those bezels, but if you're a bezel hater, then this is probably not the best phone for you. Down on the bottom is another thing that is nice to have, is the USB Type-C port. It supports fast charging when you use the included 18-watt charger. It does charge pretty quickly. Google says that you can get hours of runtime from about 10 minutes of charging, and from what I've noticed, you can see that battery meter climbing pretty quickly as soon as you plug it in. But that's the only port. There's just the USB port, and all the other holes you see here are either for the SIM card tray or microphones. If you want to plug in headphones, you can use the included adapter. This is a USB Type-C to 3.5 millimeter adapter, so you can use any sort of standard old school headphones with it if you have a pair that you really want to use. But it makes it a little bit awkward because you got to plug that in, then plug in the headphones. You need to keep it handy. So it's a little bit problematic. Mostly I've used wireless headphones with this device, and they work nicely. The Bluetooth headphones are not a problem. The problem is you need to keep them charged, and depending on the headphones, they can be more expensive. I have a cheap pair of wired noise-canceling headphones. Wireless noise-canceling headphones tend to be a lot more expensive, so I've just been using cheap Bluetooth headphones for the most part. There is a nice feature, which is from the Bluetooth settings area, you can see if you're connected to headphones, you can see what the battery level of those headphones are, as long as they're using a relatively recent Bluetooth standard. So if you're worried about the batteries dying on you, just make sure to keep an eye on it using the phone itself, and hopefully you'll still have that. This is one of the first devices to ship with Android 8.0 Oreo, and it's also got the new version of Google's Pixel Launcher. You'll notice that the search bar has been moved down here to the bottom, and there's this widget at the top that shows temperature and sort of agenda items. So you can tap that and open the forecast. Right now I'm actually offline, so I don't get a lot of notifications popping up, but that's basically how that works. You swipe up and you got a sort of standard launcher here. And one thing that's kind of interesting is that if you swipe down, you'll notice that we've got a dark theme. If I change the wallpaper to something a little bit lighter, then we'll have a light theme. So that's something that's sort of new in this version of the Pixel Launcher. It doesn't go as far as the settings menus. These are pretty much the same color no matter what, but it is kind of nice to know that you can go through a dark theme or a light theme depending on what your wallpaper is. In terms of performance, this is by far one of the fastest phones that I've tested. Now that said, I'm not comparing it to the latest flagship phones. I'm comparing it to the phone I've been using for the past year, which is this Google Nexus 5X, which came out in 2015 and was a mid-range phone at the time, and this Moto X4 Android One Edition phone, which is sort of the 2017 equivalent. Both of them for about $400 at launch. This model is a little bit faster. It has dual cameras, some extra special features, and pretty decent battery life. Camera is not quite as good as even on this older phone, and nowhere near as good as on the Pixel, though. So for $400, it's more of a mid-range device that's a little bit faster than the Nexus 5X, but with a Snapdragon 835 processor and 4 gigs of RAM, I found that the Pixel 2 is just much more responsive in day-to-day usage, and run circles around them, pretty much laps them when it comes to benchmarks, getting 2 to 3 times higher scores depending on the test. In terms of performance, let's take a look at a couple of things here. This is a video that I shot. It's a 4K video on a 1080p screen, but I just want to show you a little bit about the volume from the speakers and some of the viewing angles. So, 240 frames per second if you're doing slow motion. And there is optical image stabilization and electronic image stabilization, whereas the original Pixel phones just had a lighter. And what that means is that you should be able to get relatively smooth action when we're walking and when we're panning. So that's a little bit of video playback. You can find more details about that by checking out the Liliputing YouTube channel or liliputing.com. For the camera review, the camera really is one of the most outstanding features of this phone. It's got dedicated hardware that helps it take HDR pictures. There's a portrait mode, even though there's only a single camera, that uses algorithms to help you blur the background while keeping the foreground in focus. Let's go ahead and take a quick portrait, looking at one end of the phone. And then the camera roll here, which is powered by Google Photos, you can see that the background is blurred and the foreground is not. It's a little hard to see what's happening here, but there's 2 versions of the picture, one of which is all in focus and the other of which uses algorithms to blur it. Works best when you're taking pictures of people, but it can work pretty well on other things as long as you tap to focus on the item that you want to tap on. Let's see, let's go ahead and load a game. Turn down the volume a little bit here. So items that are a little bit more resource intensive load more quickly. Multitasking works pretty nicely on a phone like this, but single tasking is something that you're going to see a little bit of a benefit from as well. So that's a little bit of gaming. And yeah, so generally speaking, I mean, it's got a great camera. It's got excellent performance. It handles multitasking like a champ. You can do split screen multitasking if you want. And it's one of the fastest phones that you're able to find. Now, because the screen is a little bit smaller and not as high resolution as the Pixel 2 XL, I think some people might be sort of leaning towards the larger phone, but the larger phone costs about $200 more. Some people think that the phone doesn't look as good because of the way that the screen is calibrated. And I think the main advantage to the larger phone really is the fact that it has a bigger battery and gets slightly better battery life. I found that in my tests, you can get around a full day of battery out of this. It's got a 2700 milliamp hour battery, which is not huge, but it's relatively energy efficient. There are some things that you can do that can actually kind of kill the battery efficiency though. So for instance, you'll notice when I turn it off, the screen stays on. It's an AMOLED display and only part of the screen is on, and it can show notifications and the time. Turn off that feature and the screen goes dark and you'll get slightly better battery life. There's a new feature called Now Playing that can always listen and use an on-device database to determine if there's music that's playing nearby, tell you the song titles and artist names. And that's kind of a neat feature to have, but of course it's going to use a little bit of power and a little bit of data. That's another feature that you can turn off. So there's a couple of ways that you can sort of prolong the battery life. Another feature that is relatively new is Squeeze for Google Assistant. So you can actually squeeze the sides of the phone and then it thinks that I'm asking a question right now when I'm not. But that's sort of a nice way to launch that instead of saying, "Okay, Google," which is another way to launch it. And yeah, so basically it's the latest version of Google's Android software, Google's version of Google Android software. And it's a nice looking phone, I think, if you don't mind the bezels, and I personally don't. I think it fits better in my hand than the larger version, and I think that the display is a little bit more vibrant. And while it's not as high resolution, it is still more than 440 pixels per inch, and it looks pretty nice. Another feature that I really liked about this phone as a Google Project Fi customer myself is that it has a built-in eSIM card, which currently only works with Project Fi. It doesn't work with any other carrier, but I never even had to open up the SIM card tray to activate this phone. Google loaned me the phone for the purposes of this review and for the review that you can find at lilliputian.com, and also loaned me a Verizon SIM card, but I didn't try it. I just went ahead and loaded the Project Fi application, logged into my account, and switched so that my phone was no longer the Nexus and was instead the Pixel 2. When I'm done with the review, I can go back to my old phone just by launching the Project Fi app and telling it to switch again. But I'm seriously thinking about buying this phone. The camera is just that good. The battery life is definitely better than on my aging Nexus, and the Nexus phones do have a history of occasionally going into a boot loop problem. I've been using mine for about a year and haven't had any problems, but if it ever crashes, I will probably upgrade. And let's be honest, I'll probably upgrade before then anyway. For $650, it's not the most affordable phone, but it's not bad for a flagship phone, especially considering that the base model comes with 64 gigabytes of storage at a time when some other phones have just 32 gigabytes. Since there is no SIM card or micro SD card for removable storage, it's nice to have at least 64 gigabytes. You can pay $100 extra and get a 128 gig model, so that'd be $750. Or for $850, you can get the larger phone with a bigger screen and the bigger battery and a slightly different design. But as far as I can tell so far, and again, I haven't extensively tested the Pixel 2 XL yet, I think the Pixel 2 is in a lot of ways a better deal. It does cost about $250 more than this Moto X4 Android One phone. So if you just want an inexpensive way to access Google's somewhat stock Android software, although with some customizations, for $400, the Moto X4 is not bad. It's just that the camera isn't quite as good as on this older phone. So I've been spoiled by the Nexus camera, and now that I've tested the Pixel 2, I've been spoiled by its camera as well, and I think I'd have a hard time going back to anything inferior, which is a little disappointing because almost every smartphone camera in 2017 is inferior. So that is my look at the Pixel 2. Pretty much the only thing I don't love about this phone is the fact that it doesn't have a dedicated headphone jack. So you need to either use USB headphones, a dongle adapter, or wireless headphones. I can live with the fact that it doesn't have removable storage because I've had phones without removable storage for a number of years, and it has at least 64 gigs. So if you take a lot of pictures and videos, you've got a place to store them. I can live with the fact that it doesn't have removable battery because most phones these days don't. And one thing I didn't mention is that unlike my phone, the Nexus 5X, this is waterproof, as is the Moto X4. So overall, I think it's a winner for $650 if you can afford it. If you don't want to spend that kind of money at once, Google offers financing. You can get it for about $27 a month, or you might be able to find deals if you buy it from other locations. For instance, Verizon, I believe, has some offerings. I think Best Buy might. And T-Mobile's doing something crazy where even though they're not an official launch partner, it is exclusively available from Project Fi or Verizon. T-Mobile will let you switch to their network and give you some sort of deal. So you can find more information about all of that at lilliputian.com. But that is my video review of the Pixel 2 smartphone, and it's probably going to be my next phone. So let me know what you think in the comments. This is Brad Linder at Lilliputing.